it's been a very cool journey, and I feel like teaching has been really useful for me, and it's been very helpful and inspiring for me in my own practice because it helps me uh, really focus on all the various aspects of what it takes to play cello, including certain aspects that I wouldn't have normally considered in as much depth, because maybe they are, I feel like everyone has certain technical things that come more easily to them, let's say. And but just because something comes easily to you doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't think about it, because sometimes if something comes really easily to you, that's actually an opportunity for you to go even further and make it
Yeah.
even better. So thinking about all those different aspects and like thinking about, oh, I guess this is a strength of mine versus this isn't a strength. How am I going to approach those differently in the practice room?
So what are
Right.
some other ways that you maybe warm up strategies or just even how you stay on top of memorizing so much music as you might be performing one concert with some repertoire this week, but another program the next week?
Yeah. Wow. Well, so, I try to always prioritize like being connected to the basics. So, like at the beginning of a practice session, I really just my biggest priority is to feel like I'm comfortable with the instrument. So, because there have been times where I felt time pressure, so I've kind of jumped right in. But then, like after 30 minutes, I start to feel like, ooh, maybe I should have warmed up because I'm getting a little tense here in the left hand because I'm playing a lot of fast, hard stuff instantly, right? So that's taught me like I really need to respect the time it takes to reconnect with the instrument every day. Um, and in terms of like juggling different repertoire, I think a lot of it has to do with planning, like just giving yourself enough time. Like for example, right now I'm learning the Kodai Sonata and I'm playing it for the first time. It's a very challenging work. So I've been better this time about like prepping it than in the past, and I feel like I would have been in the past. I'm just listening to it a lot, getting it in my ear, and also spending time just contemplating the score, studying the score, getting a sense of what the music is trying to convey, and then bringing that knowledge, which can be obtained, or that those observations, rather, not necessarily knowledge, but the observations that can be obtained away from the instrument, bringing that then to the practice room time with the instrument, which makes that time all the more valuable because then you can implement the things that you want to implement. Yeah, I feel like there's this kind of dual way to use the time with the instrument. One is that you can use it sort of to explore and experiment, figure out what things need working on. And then there's also the time that you spend to actually work on those things. And when we're lucky, we have time with the instrument to do both. But if we don't have enough time, then we have to find other time. Like, let's say if I'm traveling on a plane, I'll spend 20 minutes looking at the score, or I'll listen to a recording of something that I made the other day so I could study it and analyze and figure out what I want to address in my next practice session with those pieces. Sometimes you do want to advocate for yourself a little bit in terms of making connections. So, like, if there's someone that you're really interested in working with, let's say, it can't hurt to try to find a way to be introduced to them, like to see if you have a mutual friend or to write an email, a cold email to them. I've done that before, and I feel like some of the time that nothing happens, but then some of the time something happens and you get to work with them maybe a few years down the road. The thing about the classical music world is that the planning and everything happens so slowly that it's like every connection you make is sort of like sowing a seed, right? So it's like you might not see that come to fruition for like 3 years, but when it finally comes to fruition, you actually can look back and say, "Oh, it's because of that one email I sent, or it's because I did that favor for that friend like 5 years ago that he put in a good word for me with this other person, and then that's how I'm here today." So sort of like our job in terms of making connections is like to sow as many seeds as possible. And then, some of them will pan out and some of them won't, but that's what will help us grow a hopefully a rewarding career. Of course, another teacher that I really, really was influenced by, in many ways, but also just because I studied with him for 8 years, was Richard Aaron. I studied with him first in high school and then at Juilliard when I went there for my undergrad. And one of the things that I wanted to emulate from him is I remember very, very early on in my relationship with him, he sort of said, he was like, you have to realize like I have limitations as a teacher. And that was
Mm,
just such a weird thing to like hear your teacher say, like he was like, I can't teach you everything you need to know. I can teach you what I know, but you need to find other people who can fill in those gaps for you. And I feel like that's the kind of teacher I also want to be, like where I acknowledge my limitations to my students because I want them to feel like I'm just a resource for them. And I can be hopefully a very helpful and present resource for them, but I can't be the only resource because every person has limitations. And I feel like in many cases it's sort of also our limitations that make us kind of special in the ways that we are special. Like it's like the things that we see in a particular way or in a particularly insightful way are because we have blindness toward other things. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
that it's kind of like both sides of the coin. So, and that's why it's so important to have inspiration from so many different sources.
Yeah, that's a really cool point you make. I feel like that's something that we don't think about often because it's easy to put your teacher up on a pedestal as like this is the goal for my playing and they're perfect, they're the master. But
Right.
especially in the realm of being an artist, everyone is so different and while we're playing the same pieces, everyone's going to play them so differently that yeah, how could you learn every single thing from that one person's interpretation? So I love that point. Thank you. I think one final question to wrap things up is what kind of pieces of advice would you give to maybe musicians who are transitioning into a more serious relationship with music, whether that's high schoolers, college students, who are looking to make things more serious and how to be serious and dedicated in their practicing? Is there any advice you would give to them?
Yeah, I would say that, when you're making the transition into being really serious about um uh like playing an instrument, for example, I think it's really important to reflect a little bit about how when you take that on, when you decide to become devoted to, let's say, the craft of cello playing, you're kind of you're part of a history and a lineage, and to sort of have respect and curiosity for that, and to know that like there's a whole world out there of music and people who have devoted their lives to this art, and those people have a lot of wisdom to share through the works that they left behind. So I would say, like, if just really try to be as curious as possible. Curiosity is the big thing. Be as curious as possible. Listen to a lot of music. Be curious about the way that other people are playing, the way that other people are thinking about things, and then try to bring your own love and curiosity and passion to what you do, and try to contribute to that lineage in the way that you can.